have such sights to show you.
We're Poppin the Scary horror podcast here. I'm your host Coale, and with me as always I have my good friend and co-host Aaron.
Hey, Coale!
Hey.
Hey, I've got a question for you. Have you ever been spelunking?
And only in Minecraft, am I right?
Oh, don't dig straight down, am I right? Now, there's some horror for you.
And we are going to give you our top 10 tips for playing Minecraft.
Always carry a water bucket.
You'll never know when you need to take care of it if you ever catch on fire. But be careful, because in another, you're in trouble. But we will be descending ourselves into this movie, The Descent.
Yeah!
So,
Descent.
I'm guessing from our initial reaction, because I saw that there was a trailer for it on one of the movies we watched, you didn't know anything about this film.
No, I still don't know anything about it except for that trailer we watched.
Yeah. For me, it's kind of interesting because I never heard about it whenever it released back in 2005. Never really heard anybody talk about it. It really wasn't until I started listening more to horror podcasts whenever they talk about 2000s horror that they're like, oh yeah, The Descent's really good.
The Descent.
Yeah, Descent. And for me, I was just like, oh, okay. And then later on, I found out that my wife is also a big fan of this movie. She's like, oh yeah, I really like The Descent. And it's like, oh,
Sounds
okay.
like overall people think The Descent is decent.
Well, let's hope so. Am I right or am I right? So I'm always wary about any time people say like, oh yeah, this film's really good, because there's been too many times where I have gone in with high expectations only for them to not be met, which I think is a dangerous mentality to have. So I'm fairly cautious whenever I'm coming to this. Again, I'm trying to keep in mind that, overall, I've heard people say like, oh yeah, I enjoyed The Descent, but at the same point, you don't hear The Descent talked about in the general public too much.
There's no Descent superfans, I guess.
Yeah, I guess not. It seems to be dissenting since then. That was terrible.
Dissentiment is overall lukewarm on this movie.
How many Descent jokes do you think we'll get before our audience descends?
I just gotta get my 2 dissents in about this before they leave.
Yeah, and I apologize for the mustiness in my house. I'll have Dissents going from the candles.
Couldn't. You can have Dissency on, yeah.
Yeah, Dissents. I do have a Dissency. It's from a decent movie, The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh, it's a Nightmare Before Christmas Cincy?
Yeah, it is.
Oh.
It's pretty cute, and I have...
You're pretty cute.
Yeah. Yeah, and it has a souvenir scent smell that makes it smell like the Polynesian from Walt Disney World. Souvenir scents is going to be your local makers to give you the smells that you love from every theme park from Walt Disney World, Disneyland, and Universal Studios.
Oh. What does the Polynesian land smell like? Does it smell like Chick-fil-A Polynesian sauce?
No. It smells like oranges.
Oh, okay.
And coconuts. It's like
Tropical.
very themed after the Polynesian Isles in Hawaii.
Oh.
Oh. So you'll get to smell that
Nice.
whenever we get down and dirty with The Descent.
Woo! Let's dive on in. You know what I'm saying?
And we have ascended from The Descent.
Yeah, we did.
I have to say, this is a rare instance. We've been doing this for almost a year now, and I don't think you have ever walked away from a film like this. And there were some films that I was like, man, this is going to be rough.
Fuck that ending, man. What the fuck?
Man.
And we went through 2. It's not a spoiler to say we watched the DVD and there's an international unrated version and like the US theaters release rated version, and they have like very slightly different endings, but they both suck.
Oh no.
The worst. That is an awful way that's the worst way you can end a movie. Mm-hmm. And you just have to stay tuned for spoilerinos if you want to know how they ended it, because wow, that's the worst way to end a movie.
Wow, that's some pretty strong words, because we have definitely seen quite a few endings.
We've seen some
here.
Endings are hard. They are hard. They're difficult. Don't do that. It's like the #1 rule too. It's wild.
Yeah.
Don't do what they just did.
Yeah, for sure. So in order to talk about the end, we probably should know about the beginning and the story, everything. So why don't we talk about that? So the descent focuses on our main protagonist still dealing with like this past trauma. She had just a horrible traumatic experience. And so the best way...
They kind of start with the trauma. That's the first scene.
Yeah. I was dancing around it. I didn't want to spoil it there. Just a little bit.
It's the first scene of the movie, man.
I know, but I'll just refer to it as past trauma. Right. Anyhow, so with this past trauma that our main character is trying to deal with, a group of friends gets together and decides, hey, how about exploring some caves? That ought to be a good old grand old time there.
Yeah, because they're like some adventurous group. They're like, I guess the first time you see them pre-trauma, they're like whitewater rafting, and then they're gonna do some cave diving.
Mm-hmm. And as they decide to descend into this cave, secrets are revealed as to their current situation. And those secrets are revealed after a unfortunate event that makes it to where it's a little bit harder to keep ascending out of a cave and more descending. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they get a teensy bit, pickle. I guess you could say.
Oh man, Aaron's so tilted right now. Anyways,
this whole movie was it was suspenseful, so I've maintained this energy throughout, and then the end was just
yeah. No, I mean, I feel like it's a basic enough premise there, and it's kind of a more unique one, I feel like, because, again, there's not too many films about, like, spelunking that you see going down in caves.
It's such a ripe atmosphere for horror, because it's claustrophobic, and so many things can go wrong, and it's just, it's dark, and you have limited resources. I mean, really, super ripe for horror. Surprised there aren't more spelunky. I guess probably it's just a difficult thing to film, being in the middle of caves and stuff.
No, for sure. And I think that for the setting and everything, like hearing about it, I was just like, oh, okay. But then actually watching it, it was kind of interesting because this is the first film in a while to really make me feel uncomfortable. Like, I wasn't like scared out of my mind or anything like that, but that was the first time I had felt a true sense of dread and fear, I feel like, in a while, because I feel like for the most part a lot of the films that are my favorite is slasher horror, and that's kind of like it's more of a sporting event than anything else. It's just kind of more fun, whereas this was just kind of genuinely scary. I mean, there's like situations where nothing scary is really happening, but yet because of how claustrophobic the film feels, it just makes you feel super closed in and uncomfortable. And obviously, as they get further in and they're pretty much up creek without a paddle in a sense, it definitely starts to instill this sense of fear and dread. And honestly, kind of would make me terrified to be in their situation. So I think the film does a very good job conveying that sensation. That sensation of just being somewhere claustrophobic, foreign, and again, just running limited on resources.
And it lends itself very well to horror because the setting itself is what makes it so you never get to catch a breath. In a lot of other horror movies, especially slasher movies and stuff, there are times when you kind of know they're safe. You know what I mean? And you're like, I can breathe. Like, they're not going to die in this scene right now because they're in a crowd of people or whatever, But then, like, in this movie, as soon as they enter the cave, the setting itself makes it so they could be in danger at any point from a number of factors at any time. And it's just a clock ticking down the whole time. So they're always something in danger, which is nice because it gives you that element while still letting the story kind of have ebbs and flows and pacing, you know, slower moments and faster moments, but there's still danger throughout the whole thing, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and there was definitely a sense of like, oh Lord, I do not have a good feeling about this, because the friend group is quite a big group.
It is
There is a lot of characters, and so whenever I saw all of them, I'm like, okay, wowza, there's definitely going to be a lot of them. And again, whenever they're in the situation, it's kind of interesting because, again, it's not like immediate danger. It's just kind of like a descent, basically. Waka waka. Into danger.
Right.
And the perils that they're going to be facing. So it was really interesting to see this sort of film, because in all honesty, I can't really say I've seen a film quite like this. I mean, really only on the podcast, the closest we've gotten to being in a cave of sorts is My Bloody Valentine.
Yeah, true.
There, but at least that was structured somewhat there, as opposed to this. This is like basically like completely chaotic and random, because it's a cave system. You know, y'all played Minecraft. You know how it'd be.
But unlike Minecraft, you can't just dig up to get out of a cave, you know?
No. Blocks do not break in perfect square shapes there.
So there's, you know, there's a real danger and possibility that they just don't get out because they're trapped in a cave.
And so story-wise, I feel like it's actually a pretty good, interesting one, and just makes sense. Now, the only thing I will say is because you do have a large cast of characters, you don't really get a lot of uniquely defined individuals. They try to characterize the characters the best they can, but really, like, I'm going to be honest, I don't think I remembered a single name.
I remember names, but I do definitely mismatch them. With the exception of like the main 2 or 3, I couldn't assign names to each. But for reference, they're all women. It's all a group of women. They're all white women too, except for one. There's an Asian woman. And so, you know, and half of them are like British, and they're all blonde, and you know, it's like they're really just. They all kind of mix together, you know what I mean?
No, for sure.
Especially when they all have their spelunking gear on and everything. They're just yelling at each other, and it's dark. It's easy to kind of blend characters together.
Yeah, for sure. And it does make it a little bit more difficult, because I feel like sometimes horror films are a little bit more careful about defining the characters. Like, even though we didn't remember the names necessarily of the characters in House of a Thousand Corpses, there was 4 of them, and they were just kind of they were stereotypes, really.
Right.
Whereas this one, again, there's like very few stuff, because you have the main lead, Sarah, who is the woman who has the traumatic experience she goes through, and she's kind of the main character, I would say so. That and Juno, who is the adventurous one, the one that's like, you know, let's go splunking.
Yeah,
let's
she's
do
the one
this.
that organized the trip, and she's like the leader throughout.
And as for the other ones, like, I'm looking on IMDb, and bless their souls, I feel like they did a good job. Like, none of them did a bad job, but it's like Rebecca, Sam, Holly.
The only one that really had another like super easily identifiable character trait was Holly. She's kind of a little more rough and adventurous and reckless, and would run into situations, and she was like, this is gonna be boring. We're going to a tourist trap, and then she's like, and you know, running face first into the caves and videotape and everything. So she was kind of the spunky one.
Which I feel like her characterization, like, it's like one of those things, like, I guess it makes sense, but also at some points, like, okay, you know, you're in this situation there, but at the same point, it wasn't one of those things where I'm like, you know, like how you hated Jerry in House of a Thousand Corpses. Like, okay, what are you doing, man?
Right.
It's just kind of, again, like, she's just adventurous and running through there.
She's a little reckless, but she still provides utility to the group or whatever. But the other two really are just what Beth and Rebecca.
I think the 3 of them there,
more?
because I believe Beth is the one that comforts Sarah whenever they're initially going into the cave.
Yeah,
I believe
she's like the comforter.
Yeah, and then Rebecca was I felt like kind of more of the mom of the group.
She seemed like the strong one, you
Mm-hmm.
know? She's like the one that's like, I'll take responsibility for this.
Yeah, and then Sam, I feel like, is just more of the meek one.
Well, isn't Sam the doctor? One of them's a doctor.
Yes, I believe she's the doctor.
So one of them has like medical expertise, which you might imagine comes in handy. But
Yeah, especially in a deep cave system where there are random drops and dangers.
Right. Definitely a few of those characters could have been combined, but, you know, I thought it was fine. It was like, it was a girls' trip. There's a bunch of girls, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely don't feel like it's like a film like, I cannot relate to any of these characters. I feel like overall, all the actresses did a very good job of, you know, trying to define their characters as best they could. But again, it's hard whenever you have a big group of characters and, you know, you try to give each of them a personality that's relatable whenever you have this big story to tell.
Yeah, I do think the script did a decent job of defining them when they could in the little moments before they dive in the cave and then as they go on. But yeah, it's a lot to.
Yeah, it does make it kind of more, I guess, interesting as we dive further into the movie to see how those characters develop, I suppose, one way and another. And again, we could talk about that in spoilers, but as is, I feel like it's a fine cast of characters. You know, they didn't like annoy me at all. So that's major kudos there. You know, I wasn't hoping any of them to die. So props there. Props all around. Yeah, and I'm trying to think about anything to talk about that's not major spoilers. One thing I will say that's another credit to this film, I like the lighting they used. You know, just being in the cave, I felt like it provided a lot of unique opportunities for lighting.
Yeah.
I do feel like the overall lighting of the film, it was kind of a little too blue towards the beginning half there. I was like, it's like one of those things, like if it's The Ring where it's rainy 24/7, it kind of fits in better. But this one, I was like, okay, you need to light it up on the blue tint just a bit. But again, that's just like a minor nitpick there. But
it's also like because the setting is like the Appalachian Mountains. They're going in the cave and it's in the middle of winter, and I feel like they kind of hammer that in real close where they're like, oh, it's so cold and it's rainy and it's cold. So I feel like they were also just doing that with their choice of color coding.
Just to try to add to the overall mood. But I do find it very visually pleasing to watch as they're like splunky through the cave there. You know, they have like the red light of the flares they light, and you know the
flashlights.
Yeah, the flashlights there, and the fire and glow sticks. Like they have a lot of lighting sources that provides for a lot of unique filming opportunities there to present a special scene with like special colors, you know,
and
very
they
stylized.
Because they all have the little helmets with their flashlights on. I think that does a great job of like showing one character's point of view, because you can see when the character looks at something and then you see like the little spotlight of their flashlight, you know what I mean? So it's like, this is what this character sees. And so I thought that's just a really clever and unique way to use light. But
so I think it's definitely very wonderful to see that. Also, there's not too much music towards the beginning. You'll start to hear like more music as like things are amplified to the nth degree, but I feel like, again, just the lack of music, you know, there was like a long freaking scene where it shows the girls going through like this very small tunnel there. It was funny because they would just have the small sound effects, whether it's like, you know, just them like moving against the rock or plumping into the water, like the sort of noise. So I think it definitely helped add to the atmosphere overall. I will say this, one of the things that I do not think aged very well with this film is some of the effects. They were it definitely was pretty laughable, you know, early 2000s sort of CG. Like, it definitely wasn't the worst. I have seen plenty of worse implementations of CG.
Definitely bad.
But it was definitely bad to where you could clearly tell, you know. It's like, you ever see those videos where they have like the JPEGs and they like just stretch it out or spin it? That's kind of what it always seemed like at some points. Like, I know there's like bats that flies out of the cave. That was pretty cheesy looking.
Yeah, I was
but
like, I've seen that green screen GIF before.
yes,
They used that free asset, and
yeah, it was pretty laughable overall. Which again, I don't feel like it's a major criticism, but it does draw me out a little bit there whenever I see something goofy.
right.
And you could tell some of the scenes they shot, it was like clearly green screened. Like there's like multiple individuals green screened because they're
see
showing
like the glow around them.
Yes,
still.
exactly. And they're just kind of reacting unnaturally. Like pretend there's a cave around you, and you're like, yeah, doing that. But but overall, that's one of the minor nitpicks I have with it there.
It really does take you out, though, because I think that the setting, the atmosphere is so good and immersive otherwise that you just really notice that they didn't pour a lot of budget into that part. But...
And, you know, fortunately, they didn't use CG for the entire film. There is some practical effects which look perfectly just fine, like as most practical effects do. So that was definitely nice to see that it wasn't just purely CG for all the stuff they wanted to accomplish there. So I definitely give major brownie points for that. Let's see. Man, there's one thing I want to talk about, but I'm gonna have to save it for spoilers. I'm like, and it's not the it's not the ending there, but there's definitely a few tidbits to talk about. Right. So while I'm thinking about stuff, was there anything else you wanted to talk about before we talk about spoilers?
I mean, before we dive into spoilers, I'll just say, if you guys are listening to, just this first half of the film, don't be confused if you're just like, oh, cave movie, that just sounds boring if that's all there is to it. There's like multiple, they sneak in multiple lines of conflict and story and lore and things. There's a lot of like depth that they've carved into this movie. Not pun intended. But but they really do. The storyline really isn't just so linear as like, oh, stuck in cave. Oop, it's they do a really good job of keeping it interesting throughout. But...
Yeah, which is definitely nice. I'm pretty glad that it's not just it's just that nameless individuals there. I mean, they definitely come across a lot of conflicts. Again, both physical and sort of emotional. Yeah,
conflicts within the friend group, also the physical conflict of being in the cave and some other sort of looming conflicts. Yeah.
So I think it definitely makes for a very interesting environment overall, just the fact that it's not just stuck in a cave, gotta get out. Like there's other stuff that's definitely adds to the overall troubles the main group is going through. So,
and it really is a journey reflective of that main character's trauma too. I mean, that gets brought up several times, so it's not something that they just like drop. It's a part of the story.
Yeah, because that's like the interesting thing is the fact that you do explore it a bit. Granted, how well that could be determined in spoilers, but say, for instance, the Evil Dead, the whole thing starts because they're trying to help their friend get over their drug addiction. That's why they go out to the cabin in the woods there, just to kind of get over that. And you never really hear them ever talk about it.
Right, it's just used as a device to get them there, right? Whereas rather, I feel like this movie, the whole exploration of the cave really is reflective of her exploration of her trauma, getting over it,
So I think that definitely is very interesting because again, they do make interesting choices, for better or for worse. There, I would say it's a combination of both that kind of adds more than just like, I'm in a cave, help.
Right.
There. So I definitely agree with you there. There's definitely some interesting stuff to talk about there. So again, definitely stick around for spoilers for that so that way you could hear it, or don't if you don't want to be spoiled, because I would say like it's kind of rough, but overall I'd probably say like this film, I'm glad I finally got around to watching it. I feel like it was a very unique film to add to my watch list there. But we could talk about that more towards the ratings there. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on at all?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, how about we go to ratings then? So I'll let you, of course, take it away.
Woo! Yeah, wow. I mean, this movie sort of grew on me pretty quick. I thought I was expecting something a little more average, especially since, like those CGI bats are like right in the beginning of the movie and there's some fucking After Effects titles and stuff, and I was like, ooh, boy, we're in for something. But, as I was watching this movie, the rating kind of spiked up like pretty well above average for part of it, and I really gotta say that ending just knocked some points clear off. I was excited to give this a better rating than what I'm gonna give it, but wow, like, there are bad endings where it's like, well, that could have been better, and then there are endings that really just kind of mess with what you watched before, and I would consider this the latter, and that just pisses me off. And so, I've cleared my pissed off state when I give this rational review, but this had more potential than what it got, is what I'm saying. So it's a 5.
Okay.
It's a 5. I would have loved to give it like a, towards the climax of the movie, I was like, this is probably a good 6.5. This is a 6.5 if I've ever seen one.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that ending knocked a clear 1.5 off. I was just like, geez, dude, really?
I mean, I can't blame you there. I can't blame you there for definitely being disappointed in the ending there. And I'd be lying if I said I was a fan of the ending, because I also am not. Yeah. If I was to give my 2 points there, again, like the unrated ending, I definitely liked less than the rated ending.
Yeah.
There, I didn't love the rated ending by any means, but comparing the two,
right,
definitely that one was a better way.
It was a step up.
But yeah, so kind of, piggybacking off what I mentioned earlier, I am definitely glad that people brought this to my attention, like podcasts and everything. I am just fairly disappointed because, again, I was pretty, invested in there because, watching the film, it was the first time I felt like a, true dread of fear kind of come over me there. And as it got towards the end there, fear got alleviated a little bit there whenever I feel like it should be just a pinnacle of fear. Like it should be just at an all-time boiling high. But the ending, unfortunately, kind of took the wind out of my sails a bit there, because I was kind of with you. I was like, man, this is a really interesting stuff visually. I like what they're doing and situations that they're in, but definitely towards the end, it was starting to lose steam for me. I might have liked it just a tiny bit better than you did. So if I was to rate it, it's probably going to be closer to your thing. I'd probably give this a 5.5 or a generous 6 there. I think there's definitely a lot of stuff I like about it, but you're right. There's no defending the ending. That it's not even like a, well, have you thought about seeing it like this? It's
right.
It's very much, it just feels kind of like a slap to the face a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, in all honesty, like I know how it is where you're watching a decent movie and then the ending does something so annoying that it just will clearly knock off at least a couple of points there, and it's like sad, but that's just the state of films and everything. You have to kind of take it in as a whole. But regardless, I still feel like even though we don't like the end, it's still an interesting watch, like especially if you haven't seen it and you love horror films. I definitely recommend giving it a watch. Just kind of be prepared for the ending to not be quite satisfactory. That would be my only caveat there, because there's still visually interesting stuff. Again, for me being a horror fanatic, not having seen this, I felt like it brought something fresh to the horror genre there. And again, just feeling that sense of fear, it's always cool. You know what I mean? It's kind of like how I am with comedy, where I've watched so much of it that I feel like I've become very jaded in particular with comedy,
right,
where it takes for a very specific thing to make me laugh.
Yeah, you can kind of see the beats, and it takes something really good to get through to you, but then you see something real fresh and you're like, oh, nice.
But that would be probably my rating, is just a teensy bit higher than your 5, but not by much by any means of the word.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So with that said, we'll probably talk about spoilers right now.
Yeah.
How about it? And I know you're going to be exploding at the chance of talking about one spoiler.
Yeah. Let's just get the ending out of the way. Let's just get it out of the way,
because we talked about it the entire time, probably more so than most endings. I would probably say between all the films we've watched, this has probably been the most infuriating ending.
Right? Because they give you so much just to yank it away, and none of it was justified. So here's the rated version ending, if you've forgotten. They get to the end of the cave, and after a weird conflict they shoehorned in, where Juno is not to be trusted. What's her name? The main character, Sarah. Sarah decides to stab her in the leg and leave her with the monsters, and then scrambles off, kind of trips and falls down a hole or whatever, hits her head, scrambles up, runs out, sees some light, and is like, oh, I did it, finally, crawls out of a hole, very birth-related. That's something I want to get into after this ending thing, so stick tuned. Is the motherfuckers watched Alien once, and we're like, what if we did all the vaginal imagery thing again? Anyway, so she crawls out of the Earth's Earthussy, the gussy of the Earth, and she's frantic and running, and blood's all down her face, and she finds the car, and she gets in the car, and she's like so relieved, and she's just driving, and she's driving way too fast, and she just at some point down the road when she feels like she's far enough, she pulls over, and she's just like, and then this fucking truck comes up behind her and honks. It's like, and she's like, and like it's gonna hit her, because that's the trauma in the beginning. Remember, is that they got hit by a car, and so you're like, oh, is she gonna get hit by a car? Are they just gonna kill her there? Because that would have been a really dumb ending. Like she made it out just to get in a car accident. But they didn't. They just teased that, and so she rolls down the window and just barfs everywhere because of all the fucking stress and relief and emotions all at once. And then she looks back at the car, and there's Juno. She's covered in blood and like out for revenge. And she's like, ah! And then she wakes up and goes, and she's still in the cave from when she hit her head. None of that shit that I just described happened. It's just she stabbed Juno in the leg, and she ran and slipped down the cave and hit her head. Or maybe this was the point where she hit her head way earlier in the movie. I have no idea. Was that the point of was it that like the 30 minutes in point where she hit her movie? Who knows? Because she hit her head multiple times. So I couldn't tell you which time she imagined all of that shit from. But I assume it's the point that I just described, because she wouldn't have been able to see every other character's point of view from the previous time she had hit her head. So, that's how the rated version ends. The unrated version, same shit.
Ooh, and just to make a clarification, I don't know if you picked this up on the rated ending. I don't think she woke up in the cave. It just did a close up of her face freaking out, I think.
Yeah, but just like her waking up. I assume she was dark all around her, so I assume she was still in the cave.
Oh, man, I didn't get that from the ending. What I got is just the fact that it's like, now she has Juno's corpse haunting her, just like she has the haunting of like her child, basically, like the loss.
Maybe.
I see. That's what I picked up from it there, because yeah, as soon as they mentioned that, I was like, whoa, like hold on.
I can see that. That would be...
and it was just black behind her for artistic effect, kind of like
that would be better. But then why didn't it just show her in a different location? Just
I don't know. I took it as a stylistic effect there, where she's like facing towards the camera. It's just like to get an extra shock look there, or like again just kind of diving into her psychosis, maybe because it was like pretty pitch black, and it was like an unnatural white light on her face there. Yeah. So that's what I picked up from it. Although if the filmmakers did intend on her like, she's woken up in the cave in the rated ending, then yeah, that absolutely sucks completely.
Okay, that would have been a little better than in the rated ending.
Yeah, I'll have to confirm it there for sure.
Because we watched the unrated one first, so that's what I had in my mind, and it looked like the same shot, you know what I mean? Because she so in the unrated version, she wakes up in the cave, and then she has just a fucking moment with her reliving her trauma, like the dream that she has often, where she's seeing her daughter on her birthday because her daughter died in a car wreck. That's how the film starts. And they sing Happy Birthday together, and it zooms out, and there's some real bad PS1 style textures of the cave, and she's still in the cave. And
yeah.
So that was an awful ending, and that's what knocked off 1.5 points for me.
I did confirm she is not in the cave in the U.S. ending.
In the U.S. ending.
Yeah, apparently the U.K. ending, which is the unrated ending we watched, apparently test audiences didn't like how bleak it was of an ending, so then they just changed it to where it's just like the dead Juno just in the passenger seat, and then it just shows her screaming leading to credits. there.
That's just so weird, because, like, then where is she? Because it's a different... Is
Yeah,
that the zoom in of her face in the car? Or is she waking up somewhere else?
I think it's just a zoom in of the face in the car. That's what I got, but
Oh.
I feel like, again, they might have had a weird edit because the UK ending was the original ending,
Right.
and so then they just cut it off because it's like, oh, stylistically showing a woman screaming at the camera there. But you're right, like that ending, I felt like you could have written it, who am I kidding, maybe you definitely could have written it better if you were going down that route. But again, I feel like I am not a fan of the fake out endings per se, and
No,
this
it's
is coming
awful.
from me, which I love the slasher films, like, oh, he's really not dead, but as opposed to, like, I feel like at the very least, usually the lone survivor at least still has the victory of surviving there.
Right.
Whereas this, I feel like it just robs everything there, and she just imagines it, and then imagines the dead Juno.
I was fine
Yeah.
with the bleakness. I was fine with her getting robbed of getting out, I wasn't fine in it being all a dream. It was
Yeah.
all a dream the whole time. When has that ever been a positive, like...
No, it's rarely ever worked. I mean, the only time I feel like it's ever worked for me, and this isn't even related to horror, is the original Alice in Wonderland from Disney. But again, that's kind of the point of
Yeah,
the story.
That's the entire story,
you know,
yeah.
but that's
This
if
one
you have it built
tries.
in. Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and just call out if there's any actually Andy's in the chat.
Yeah.
Yes, she has trauma, and these trauma gives her these nightmares of things that don't happen, and that is showcased from the beginning of the movie, right? Because her husband and her daughter die in a car wreck where fucking copper pipes went through the windshield and killed them both, and
that was a scene, wasn't it?
yeah, that's honestly, to their credit, that's what started out the suspense real early, where it was just like, okay, well, anything can happen, I guess, because we just watched a little girl and a dude die from copper pipes impaling them. So okay, but yeah, no, she like, there's a scene where she's like, she wakes up in the cabin in the morning, and she kind of looks at her cabin mate, and she walks over to the window because she thinks she hears something, and then just a pipe goes through her head, and then she wakes up, and she's like, oh, that didn't happen. And I was like, okay, this is gonna be a thing they do in the movie, I guess. Still doesn't justify fucking showing us 5 minutes of content of someone escaping and then being like, actually, that didn't happen. Haha. I was like, then why the fuck did I watch that? Like that could have one of two effects. It either has the effect of like, oh, they got me, in which case it's like, that you've just fucking robbed me of the ending that I watched, and now there's a different ending. Why did you make me watch that? Or you have the other reaction of like, oh, I knew this was coming, in which case you'd be sitting through the whole point being like, all right, when does she wake up? When does she wake up? It's just like bad device either way.
No, you know what would have been better, I think, is if you wanted to keep those like fake outs, the drama, everything else, I think. And see, this is like me just like being like, well, let me tell you what I do as a director, But I think it definitely, because one thing we didn't talk about is the fact that there's a whole setup at the beginning, because as they find out, they're not alone in the cave. There's like these Nosferatu looking Wendigos, which I don't know if they're Wendigos. We don't know exactly what they are, but basically these creatures that lurk around in the dark. And they start attacking the main group, and Juno is fighting them off with her little spelunking axe, slinging around, just because Holly is like knocked down and basically is trying to defend her and keep her body safe. And as soon as she thinks she's defeated them all, I believe it's oh man, I can't think of her name, but one of the people come up behind her.
It's like Beth or someone.
Yes, it was someone like that. I'll have to confirm it there. This is super professional. Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no. I'm looking here. They made a sequel to Descent.
That's probably gotta be with a different group of people.
Yeah, I know. That's gotta be the scariest thing I've seen yet. All right, come on. Look in here, you son of a gun. Let's see. It was Beth. You're right. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. How about that? So Beth comes up and grabs Juno on the arm, as opposed to like whispering,
Right.
like Juno or whatever. And Juno attacks Beth and has the axe go through her throat there. And it sets up this interesting thing where she's like, oh god, I've killed a lot of people. It's stupid, but at least
it's pretty dumb.
It's pretty dumb, but I guess in order to get it, like, how they got there is stupid, but it is interesting kind of accidentally killing someone
Right.
there.
There's a lot of lack of communication in this entire fucking friendship.
Yes. Yeah, definitely poor communications, both intentional and unintentional. So
There's
it's
so many moments I could tally. That whole thing happened from a lack of communication. Beth could have been like, oh my god. She just, like, apparently was just standing behind her, I guess, just watching her fight off this fucking creature, and then decided to not say anything. Like, and you can't even be like, well, she was worried that if she said something, then the creatures that detect sound could go find her. It's like, yeah, they just were like having a screaming axe fight. Like, you didn't think you could be like, oh my god, Juno, are you okay? Or whatever. Like, just...
no,
Jesus.
and so yeah, so it's definitely dumb how it got there, but it leads to a part where basically Juno assumes that Beth is dead and runs off, and then turns out whenever the group gets split up because those creatures cause everyone to scatter and they go different directions, and so Sarah, whenever she basically takes a fall, hits her head, and wakes up, she sees later on as she continues on after seeing some horrific things that Beth is still alive and just gasping from the throat, and Beth ultimately decides, like, Juno did this to me on purpose. Again, it's pretty dumb how it happened. I wish it would have been written much better there. Like, if you have, like, an Among Us, sort of story.
I just didn't think that was necessary when there were already two horror conflicts there. There's already the conflict of they're trapped in a cave and they might not be able to get out at all. And then there's the conflict of these creatures that are fighting them. Why would you even bother laying in that? Well, there's already three conflicts, actually, because you don't know if Sarah's going crazy or not, if she's hallucinating or whatever, because she was, like, been hearing things for half the movie, and she's been waking up to weird dreams, and she might not, so she's having a psychological battle at the same time. It's like, why would you layer in that fourth conflict?
I feel like if you were going to do that conflict, make the antagonistic level, like, have them be at a bigger rivalry. Like,
I do think they seasoned it a little appropriately, because even in the beginning, remember when they're riding in the car, it's Beth and it's Beth
Juno.
and it's Beth and it's Sarah riding in the car together, and Beth is like, we can ditch this popsicle stand, we can go drink in town, if you're not ready. And she's like, I'm fine. She's like, I'm just not ready for Juno, like, she's like, well, she's a lot, but it'll be fine. So there's already, like, a little bit of conflict there that's just, like, sort of established, like, they kind of grind on each other's gears. But
I think, like, further amplify it, because I feel like, what they say, like, whenever people are in tense situations, like, more antagonistic attributes come out in people. So I think it needs just to be, not cabin fever per se, but just kind of survival mode kind of flare up a little bit more, because they could have also just made it, like, I feel like they underplayed the fact that Juno, and again, I will get back to how I would have rewritten the ending a little bit there. I realize this is just podcast banter, like, getting around, so definitely haven't forgotten about that. But I think one thing they could have amplified a bit more and made it kind of more of a problem is the fact that whenever the group goes through, and whenever they're going through, and Sarah kind of has a meltdown being stuck, and then realizes, oh no, the tunnel that's, like, barely big enough for them to go through collapses in. And so then whenever it's revealed, like, oh, it's okay, Juno has the book and everything, and we'll be able to get us through. And plus, we paid for insurance in case we don't come back, that people will come looking for us in this cave, right? And then it's revealed Juno, A, did not bring the book, and B, did not go to the cave they said they were going to because she wanted to explore an area nobody's been to.
Yeah.
So I don't know about you. I would be really, really upset.
Right. That would.
Yeah. I feel like they took it, and they are upset, but I feel like they take it better in stride. There's a couple of, like, what the heck?
And I was fine with that in that moment, where they're like, whatever. Right now, we need to focus on sticking together, on teamwork, and getting out of here. I get that in the moment, but yeah, then when shit starts hitting the fan, wouldn't you be like, this is your fault, Juno. Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't you have some of that, you know?
For sure, and definitely, like, at least maybe if you are to have, like, sort of, like, Beth tell Sarah that Juno is the one that hurt you. Because Beth, like, again, like, seeing it from her point of view, like, you could tell Juno wasn't malicious. She was genuinely sorry. And, again, I guess, like, Beth is, like, super bitter about it, saying, like, you know, oh, Juno did this to me.
Right.
Don't trust Juno. And I feel like I guess I understand what they were trying to do. I just feel like if you're going to have something like that, make the clash between them even more real. Like, give her a reason as to why she would still be damning Juno's name, like, in her final moments. Right. So, I don't know.
I mean,
yeah.
I do think they tried to front load that as much as possible. Because not only was that moment in the car, there was, like, whenever Sarah had her trauma, Juno was the one that left really quickly. She, like, couldn't handle it or whatever. So I, like... And then that kind of fuels Juno's, like, desire to stick around later, you know what I mean? Whenever they're in this traumatic situation, she's like, no, I can't leave Sarah here. And that's the whole reason why she's, like, not taking the three of them and leaving, because they have to find Sarah and get around.
Yeah. Which I think definitely makes for, like, a good character. However, if you're going to be making the decisions you are, I feel like you can't have it be both ways. I feel like,
and I agree. I think where it fell flat was none of that conflict arose once they were in the cave. Really, none of that was no sort of resentment was shown on anyone's side there. But.
Yeah, and I do think it is pretty heart-wrenching that, you know, Beth basically begs Sarah to kill her because she doesn't want to be killed by the Wendigo creatures because, you know, they're just pretty much malicious, will tear you apart, and I can understand that. And so Sarah having to do that, again, probably mess with her psychosis again further with that. So I think it definitely adds to the unstableness of her brain. However, because, again, whenever we get to the ending of the film, I feel like it would have been... Here's the way I would have tried to make it better.
Yeah.
You know, because it's Sarah that's the one that's saying, like, there's something out there, like, killing us. And I feel like it would be a lot more interesting if somehow, like, the creature she was imagining was fake, and it's just the fact of being in a claustrophobic, stressful environment is kind of affecting her psyche to where she's becoming more and more mentally unstable. And then that's kind of leads her to start kind of believing people are, you know, turning against her and there's no one she could trust. Sort of like that. I think that definitely would have been at least a little bit more interesting. And again, like, having the whole, like, fake out there, I guess, still would have felt cheap, but at the very least you could see at least the descent of madness that she's going through. Because again, you don't really feel like, again, you see it at the beginning a couple of times, nothing, and then just a final psych, you know, for the UK ending. So I feel like, and because it wasn't even that well shot of an ending. Like, I know some people will argue with it, but like you mentioned, like, whenever she, like, thinks she's seeing her daughter with the birthday cake and the candles lit, everything, and I do feel like it was shot well. I just feel like it feels cheap. Like, oh, you should care about this because you've been seeing this image a couple of times, and now you realize that she snapped and zooms out in the little alcove of the PlayStation 1 cave.
And I feel like they were like, oh yeah, no, this has got to be good because we've shown just the birthday cake going out, but not the full scene. We haven't zoomed out to see her looking at her daughter's face. So, like, you're gonna get to see it in full at the very end, and you'll appreciate it. But just ruin everything. And it also didn't send the message that I think the movie was trying to send of her overcoming trauma and crawling out of the cave. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say nice about towards the end, because I feel like, again, like, if we only watched the film and it was the US version, I feel like as much of a cheap out ending as it is, it gets cheapened by the fact it's fake out. But there are some, like, genuinely nice moments, because I do like, you know, the light shining through and her climbing up the pile of bones to get out. Like, it's comedic as all get out there on how many bones there are, but at least it's, like, visually a cool thing just seeing her ascend. But
It's
Yeah,
I just feel
it's
like
rough.
you could have accomplished that same bleakness, despair, her going back to her trauma, all those things without doing the it's just a dream ending. You could have had everything the same up until like she thinks she finds the exit and she goes and because they even teased this earlier, right? Whenever Holly's running and she's like, "There was light there. That's the way out," and Juno was like, "No, that's just whatever she said it was."
Yeah,
She's like, "We're 2 miles down. There's no way." They could have done the same thing where she's like, "There's light there," and she crawls and finds her way out or whatever, and then she like gets there and looks up, and it's just like sheer, cliff face 2 miles up, and she can't get to the light or whatever, and then she just accepts her death, looks down, sees her daughter and the birthday cakes or whatever, or like the shining of her helmet makes it look like a birthday candle or something, and she starts having that vision, and then you see the little vampire monsters start crawling in or whatever, and she overcomes her trauma by accepting her death, like instead of being afraid of death. That would have been a better ending, and it wouldn't have been only showing you events that actually happened while still showing you her psychosis, and like it wouldn't feel cheap. But
Not gonna lie, the way I thought the film was going to end was that semi truck passing by
just plows into her.
again, like either plows into her or whenever it went past, there was those logs in the back. So
Final Destination.
Yes, exactly. That's what I thought was gonna happen.
I was afraid of the same thing because because that's exactly how the movie started, and that's exactly her fear was fucking things flying through her car and killing her.
Yeah, I definitely wish they just would have played up the psychosis bit a little more, because you could definitely start to see Sarah look more deranged, especially whenever she has to fight off those creatures. She's like just gouging their eyes out with her thumbs there and just biting their ears off. Going more primal, which I definitely think that definitely would have been more interesting.
One thing I will say that what you describing that reminded me is I do want to talk about how maternal this movie was, like showcasing specifically, because I mentioned that like it's about her trauma, but it's about specifically her trauma of losing her daughter. Apparently she doesn't give a fuck about her husband because it never comes up again. But it's specifically her trauma of a mother having not been able to like protect her daughter and die, right? And that comes up so many times in the movie. Not just first off the cave, that little entrance that they go in the first time is like obviously vagina shaped, so they're like going into the birth canal and shit. And there's so many, and it starts getting goopy and you fucking dischargey. I mean, it's like the alien did the shit out of it. You know what I mean? They're like, what if it was all a vagina? And then they get in there, and it's first off, it's a group of all women. It's like women in this cave, and the creatures they're fighting are all men. And they don't really see another woman until they see only Sarah sees this fucking weird, the woman version of the little creatures, and she killed its child, and then it's like angry and upset and writhing at her, and she has to fight in this pool of blood, which is just really like fucking birth pool-y, like like it just seems really just like the imagery of giving birth there. She finally kills her, and then there's like a little opening that's also pretty vagina shaped that Juno steps in, and that's where she comes out just covered in blood like a fucking baby would during birth, and she's been like reborn as this, fucking like the whole movie's like there's so much just like vaginal motherly matron that it's like, but I think it was really good because they never just beat you over the fucking head with it. They were never like, oh, doesn't this remind you of your dead daughter, Sarah? Like, they never did like that. But like, and so I was kind of glad for that aspect that she wasn't just like having visions of her dead daughter throughout the whole time, because I feel like we got it, you know what I mean? But then because they didn't do that, it made the ending not make any sense. But.
Yeah, like, like that's actually really insightful. Like I really like the way because you described it, and I feel like again it just fuels ideas for like, oh, what if you had done more of this ending there. But that pool scene, I love all the blood that's coagulating in there.
That was one of those things that was like, that's really cheesy, kind of corny, but it was like so cool. So it was like, it's like, it's fine. This is fine.
That's exactly how I felt again. And it's actually like on the cover of the DVD and Blu-ray So, and it's one of those things like, okay, clearly they're like, how do we get a pool of blood
Right.
there? But again, I think it's really cool. But I think definitely like having Sarah mentally snapped, I wish they would have played into that more. Because again, like whenever she meets up with Juno, you feel like, okay, you could definitely tell she's on to Juno there. But I wish she
Right.
would have, again, kind of become more primal or freak out.
Right. I wish it
there.
would have. I mean,
Mhm.
if this was a realistic
Yeah.
scenario, I wish it would have communicated. Did you kill Beth?
Yes.
Could have asked that question. You know what Juno would have said? She probably would have said, "Yeah, it was an accident."
Yeah. Yeah, but they don't say anything, and you know, even whenever Juno sees that, you know, Sarah's holding the necklace, which she knows that Beth last have and stuff,
Right.
she's like, no, I can explain. It was a huge accident. She just walked up behind me, bro.
Right.
It just scared me.
I was
But
fighting the creatures, and she grabbed my shoulder.
I don't know. But nope, instead Sarah just takes out the knee there and leaves her to die with all of the crawlers.
Which was also dumb. Like, even if you, like, man, even if you distrusted her and you were gonna take her out before she took you out, wouldn't you wait to do that until you saw the exit? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Saw a way out.
I guess like her thinking is like, oh, you know, the crawlers are coming, so I'll buy myself extra time. I don't know. It's pretty rough towards the end, which kind of sucks because again, it has like a. I know obviously you don't have a problem with this ending of the show, but it's like Game of Thrones for me, where I feel like the first half of the series solid good, and then as they get towards the end, there's a lot more hiccups and issues that happen. I feel like the Descent is sort of like that in a sense there, where, you know, beginning parts pretty solid, entertaining, good stuff all the way throughout, and then towards the end there's just a lot of bumps in a road there.
I want to clarify my position on
yes.
the Game of Thrones.
Yes,
ending.
I know you. We've talked about this multiple times before. I know you don't think the ending deserves to get as bashed as it does.
Well, no, it's an objectively bad ending.
Mm-hmm.
It's a terrible last season. I think people attack the motivations for it ending that way, and that's not what's wrong with that last season. It's the way they paced it. It's the way they decided to put together. It's the way that nothing else happens. That whole last season's garbage. It's not because. Spoiler alert for Game of Thrones. Stop listening for the next 10 seconds if you... But it's not because Dany burns down King's Landing. She was going to do that from the beginning if you watched the fucking movie. It's obvious she was going to do that. If you watch the fucking series, people are like, Dany would never do that. I was like, bitch, have you been paying attention? Like, that's all she would do, man. But... So no, I just hate when people were like, I can't watch this show anymore. I can never go back and rewatch it because the ending is bad. I was like, bitch, the plot was not what made Game of Thrones amazing. The plot was good.
Yes,
it's the characters, it's the scenery, it's the lore. There's so many other things that make things great, but people just focus on the story. Yeah, it ended the story. If you didn't like the story ending, yeah, whatever. But just know it ends bad and enjoy the rest. That's also how I feel about this movie. I would watch it again. It was good. It was suspenseful. They did so many things right. There's just also so many things wrong that bumped down the score for me. But it was still good. I'm gonna be thinking about it. It's just like it's one of those things. That's why I'm so frustrated about it, because it could have been so much better.
Man, that was a beautiful segue. I had to actually give like an audible applause for that one there. I was like, God dang, that was good. But yeah, so I think definitely, like, even though this ending sucks, I mean, that's pretty much my stance, especially as well as Aaron's, but there is still a lot of good stuff about it. The one thing I will actually kind of mention that we haven't really talked a lot about is the crawlers, as they're deemed themselves. I think they're fine. I don't think they're I think it's very much the most fine monster I've seen in a film.
I do think they're like fairly realistic, you know what I mean? Like, I could see that happening, even though it's obviously like high horror fantasy here. There's like blind creatures that can just crawl everywhere, and they're human-like, and they're like, you know.
No, I just wish, like, again, I know that, you know, in a scenario like this, there's no like history books being like, oh, these are what the creatures are. They just assume they're like, oh, these things have been born down here. They're basically adept for exploring the dark caves where there's no light whatsoever. I honestly thought with like how old the equipment they found it was Wendigos, because do you know anything about Wendigos?
Probably not like accurate.
Okay.
So I know them from like video games and stuff. They have wildly different interpretations.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought they were like ice yetis. Is that not what a Wendigo is?
There's been different interpretations there. One of the most popular ones I saw is Until Dawn, which, if you have not played, I highly recommend. It is a top tier game, and I wish that game studio would release a game as good as Until Dawn, but I feel like it was lightning in a jar sort of moment there.
Yeah.
But from what I believe about what a Wendigo is that it was like a Native American legend about basically individuals that would resort to cannibalism, that they would be cursed to become these monsters that would attack people. So I thought with them being trapped in a cave and them constantly showing like people have been here before us, it's like doesn't mean it got out.
And they even see those like cave paintings in there.
So I thought like they were going to resort to being Wendigos, which also would have been a pretty much more substantial idea, playing off that idea. Because basically, like, if they were trapped down there for a long period of time, they would have to resort to cannibalism there. But instead, there's just, like, this whole race of crawlers and everything. So I thought it was going to go the Wendigo route, but that's definitely not what they did.
I mean, this could have been this movie's interpretation of Wendigos, though, because they definitely did have the native art, and they mentioned that these might be people. You know what I mean? Because some of them they have like a brief conversation about what they are. It's like Juno and the two other girls while Sarah's down in the thing, and they're like, what are these things or whatever, and so like I think it's human, and they're like it's not human, but they're like they can tell where we are from sound or whatever.
I'm sorry, Aaron. I'm detracting this entirely. I just found this.
Who need they Windows-ye?
I was looking up Wendigos and this popped up, and I'm like, but yeah, and looking at it, even if it was more of the classic, creature there. Yeah,
it looks like
I know. I'm gonna have to like save that, but. So that's what I kind of imagined the route they were going down. But even at the beginning, they're showing like a lot of deer skulls. They even showed the dead deer there. I definitely think that would have been a much better way to go about is play that up, because not only do you have the fear of being chased by Wendigos, but also if you turn into a Wendigo there, which I guess like I think it happens like over a period of time, kind of like madness setting in.
Right.
But I don't know. That's just me hoping for a much cooler idea. Because again, the crawlers themselves are just fine. I do like how they did practical effects on them. Although there are some moments that it looks like just a dude in a rubber mask.
There are, especially whenever they need to have a bunch of crawlers. Like those moments were terribly CGI.
Oh, dude, that just looked like PlayStation 1 cutscene. There, Mortal Kombat live actors in front of it there. Yeah, it was definitely pretty rough overall. Oh, one of the dream sequences that I will say, aside from the ending, depending on which version you watch, that I hated was whenever it's showing like Sarah's daughter, and it's like from her bag, and then it just zooms in, and then suddenly it cuts to like a crawler just turning around screaming at the camera. I was like, that's cheap.
Yeah, there were a few moments like that. One of my favorite terrible moments that we haven't talked about yet is whenever it's like Holly or somebody, and I can't remember who it is. Somebody's fighting off a Wendigo, and then Juno walks in from behind and just throws her axe. And it impales in the back, and as if that wasn't bad enough, she walks up and snaps its neck. Like she's fucking the Black Widow or some shit. I was like, that's a half a point off right there. Just the fact that happened is at least a point or a point and a half out.
Yeah. I forgot that was one of the moments I just heard you say, come on.
Jesus, really? Like, it wasn't even a convincing neck snap. It was just, like, exactly what you think of whenever, like, your local improv group pretends to snap someone's neck on stage. It was just like... All right, okay.
Oh man, yeah. I honestly got more entertainment just hearing your banter and commentary, especially at the very end. You started going off on a tirade.
That just pissed me off, man.
You want to know what was a good throwback?
Yeah.
Was the fact that whenever they're in the cave system, and man, I already forgot the girl's name, but the girl who has the watch.
Oh yeah,
And
the fucking dumb little one.
Yes,
that
yes,
a
the
boyfriend
dumb.
gave me.
Yes, exactly. And so they're just like, "That's a dumb watch." It's like, "Oh, my boyfriend gave it to me. I'm setting it up for the cave. Gotta get the time zones right." And then as they're trying to lay silent, as the crawlers are going around, it's Sam's watch, by the way.
Sam.
It just goes off. I just laughed because I thought that was like a very well done thing. I don't feel like it's like a cheap thing there, because in all honesty, they don't bring up the watch hardly ever. It's like right at the beginning, and then at 3/4 of the film later, it just pops up, and it's just
most of the time, if they just do a little mention like that and then it comes into play later, I'm like, that was good.
Yep, that was a good one. It's a good one, but yeah. Oh man, makes me wish that other aspects could have been better there.
Yeah, because they really did do a good job of layering in those details, and there was a lot of moments that were just like, you alright?
Yeah, I just remembered something. Go ahead.
Okay, real quick. There are a lot of moments where there's just like there's some level of conflict there, and I was already like, oh, this is gonna happen. Oh no, but this could happen. Oh, yeah. There's so many things where it's like they set up situations that something further could happen, and not all those ideas materialize, but just the fact that pretty much every time they're in danger, you're like, oh fuck, is this gonna happen? Is like a good sign for a suspense movie like this.
One of the things I remembered, and this is kind of relating back to our good old character Holly. Again, I told you it kind of got annoying, just like very how spunky she is, how she lives for danger.
Yeah.
The thing that makes me so mad is the fact that pretty much whenever they know they're in a dire situation, that they can't be messing around. It's not even just like early messing around with stuff or whatever. Is whenever she's like running ahead, she's like, I found a light. It's like, no, Holly, don't. And then she's like, I'm running. And then just slips into a hole and then
breaks her leg.
Yeah, breaks her leg, which, to be fair, I feel like that's, again, good idea. Like, character breaks a leg and now you have to drag somebody who's handicapped at the current moment. But I just hated the way they did that there, because she already knows they're in trouble. They need to be careful. But she's still like, and just slides down. But
that pissed me off too.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, come on.
And especially because, like, not only did she know that they're in a dangerous situation, but she had done that once before and almost got hurt. And Juno had to be like, stop, just like, she's like, freeze, and then she like lights up a thing and there's actually a cavern that was like a minute. So you think after having like 2 near-death experiences already, the third time would be a charm?
Yes.
But nope, she just falls down a hole and breaks her leg. Man, at that point I'd been like, see ya, bitch.
No, yeah, it's pretty frustrating. But fortunately, like I said, aside from the major ending, there's just like a lot of small nitpicks along the way there. But I feel like it does add a lot of tense moments, like especially whenever they had to cross that cavern there and they're having to stick like those hooks into the ceiling there.
Right.
It's pretty nerve-wracking, but I feel like it's done pretty well. Like I was on the edge of my seat there,
and they give you that good mystery of like they're trying to conserve as much as possible because they lost some stuff in the cave-in, and so she's like trying to do this with only 3 hooks or whatever, and so she puts the first 2 in, and then she looks and there's already like a hook for the third one, and so that's the first time you see that like other people have been here. And she was like, oh, and then she hooks it in, but then again she doesn't fucking communicate because nobody fucking communicates here. She doesn't mention that, oh, isn't this weird that there's a third hook here, and instead she just gets the rope going, and then Juno's like, all right, well, I'm gonna climb across the hooks, and then the last one comes out and it's like, wow, you could have just told me that would have happened.
And at least to that nasty rope burn. There's a lot of moments like that where both Aaron and I were just like, ooh. You know, they just, and it's funny because, like, obviously we've seen a lot more carnage in these films, but it's just, again, kind of like more realistic small moments like that just really sting, because whenever it's like big and explosive, then you just kind of laugh because you don't know how to comprehend. But yeah, definitely cray stuff there.
Stuff.
Was there anything else you wanted to mention at all in particular?
I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot that I think we skipped over, just because I do think this movie did a good job of layering in details. Really, just like one mention and go on, and then it brings it up later, and you're like, okay, wow. It did a good job of that, and it did a good job pacing it all and everything. So there's definitely stuff that we haven't talked about, but I feel like I've hit on everything that really...
Yeah, that you really want to talk about. Otherwise, it's just us talking about the whole film.
movie, yeah.
So, I mean, which, again, I think it's definitely enjoyable. I'm glad I watched it. It's just, I think it just kind of is upsetting, the fact that they didn't do better towards the end.
Right.
There. So yeah, I think that probably wraps up this episode, don't you think?
I think so.
So yeah, definitely. You haven't seen Descent, at least watch it. Just know that the ending is not quite what you're probably going to be expecting.
Yeah.
So yeah, with that being said, we have come to an interesting part, because this is normally the part where I tease you about the next film, but you already know about the next film.
You
there
already know.
Yes, because coming up on our next episode, it's going to be our 1-year anniversary of doing this podcast. I know we made it this far already, so
crazy.
we'll have that going up, and we have some special surprises along the way there.
You're gonna love it.
But to tease y'all, guess at home, boys and girls, it is a sequel to a film we have already watched. However, it is going to be the sequel to the very first film we watched and started this whole journey here. Yeah. That's right, boys and girls. Buckle in for the next episode, because we're going to be popping the scary with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Electric Boogaloo.
Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Castbox, or iTunes platforms to stay up to date when new episodes drop. To see what Aaron and I are up to, check out our respective Twitter accounts. For me, it is @ColeKirkVA, and for Aaron, it is @AnimalGameDev. Thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. We'll speak to you all again next time when we're popping the scary.